Hi, everyone. It's Larry Johnson, your host for A Principal's Voices. And I'm delighted to have Jeff Williams with me today, a fellow follower of Jesus. But more than that, he is the head, you could say head or headmaster these days. I know that's politically
Head of school.
incorrect. Okay, head of
Yes, head
school.
of school.
That's the new term of 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 Trinity Christian Academy. Did I get that right?
You
Okay.
did? Yes.
And now, are you in Dallas proper or Fort Worth?
Dallas.
Okay, all right. I know that you got to get that right down there.
Side
All
by
right.
side.
All right. So anyway, and we're going to talk several things today. We're going to get into his career choice. I'm always curious how people came to do what they do, and I know that Jeff is going to be really honest with me and not give me any of this, hokle pokle, Damascus Road stuff. That doesn't happen very often. And then because people usually find their careers in often accidental ways. I know I did, and when God leads us, he's a lot more clever than we are. He's
Mhm.
a lot more, what's the word, multidimensional than we are. You see, we're too linear, too fixed in our thinking. So anyway, we're going to talk about that. And he's what, 3 years into a new school here, and I'm going to ask him a little bit about their philanthropy program and how he sees that growing, what he wants to do with it, but also how he wants to use that as a way to enhance the life of the school. So that's where we're going with this, and he'll probably ask some other questions, and that's fine. So welcome, Jeff.
Thank you, Larry. It's an honor to be here.
So now you are a native Texan. We discovered that, and
Yes.
I gave you my well, you don't have that overweening kind of. It isn't arrogance. It's something else. In the East, it's arrogance and condescension, but in Texas, it's a little different. And I'm not sure. It's sort of maybe it's braggadocio, but it's not really. Um, Maybe it's an enlarged sense of who they are. And it just occurred to me, Jeff. One reason why that may be the case, I grew up in Nashville, and I went to school there, went to school in the Northeast, lived most of my life in the East. Um, and I traveled to California, but I'd never really been in that area in between. Well, I've been to Denver, but you just go and come and this kind of thing. But when I first moved west in 2006, when I came to Idaho, where I am now, one of the first things that really was impressed upon me, and it's still kind of like an awing thing, is how big everything is. The scale of everything, the
Yeah.
scale of the mountains, the scale of the sky. I've been in West Texas. It's like it goes on forever. Uh, and so I can see why, if you grow up in that kind of environment, where you might feel that the world exists like that. And then when you go elsewhere, you probably feel like you're being squeezed. It's like four lanes being squeezed into one and a half here,
Yeah.
and you're jockeying for position as you go down the road. You've been to Boston, haven't you, Jeff?
Oh, yes.
Well, then you probably know there are any number of intersections where if you're at a light and there are three lanes across the intersection, there are two lanes
There's
and they're all
two.
going straight. So it's like it's like a death match to see who's going to get one of those lanes. Um, I can't get over that. Someone said to me once, this was years ago, that traffic signals in Boston are merely leftover Christmas decorations. Um, and I think
So
in some,
wide.
and yeah, well, I've driven in New York, I've driven in the city, and I still think Boston's wilder than New York City to drive
Mm.
in. Um, and so, at least in New York, it's organized chaos, you know,
Organized. Well
organized
said.
chaos. And
Well
and
said.
and one more thing about the traffic that we're going on. Boise, as you may know, has experienced considerable growth over the past decade or two, and all this is coming from the outside. And it was, I live in the Boise Valley, the Treasure Valley, where I think it's 60% of the state's population lives in this one valley, which is about 30 miles wide and about 60 miles long. So that's
Mm.
where it is. Well, needless to say, people coming with different driving styles. All right. And then on top of that, people here are not used to what I call urban driving. You know, they have difficulty merging, they have difficulty yielding, they have difficulty maintaining a constant speed. And so when you get the combination of the people who never get within 10 miles of the speed limit on the slow side, and then you have what I call the out of control cowboys on the high side, and you put those two groups together, it makes for some interesting situations. Let's just say that. Okay. So anyway, and I was in the Dallas area in April, I think it was, and
Right.
and I had I didn't even have a car. I was staying at the airport Hyatt, and I was I was chauffeured around a little bit, but it didn't seem all that crazy when I was moving. Of course, I wasn't paying attention. I didn't have to worry about it, and which is kind of nice. But anyway, so on to that though. So you've been at this school for 3 years. If you're as frank as you're willing to be, and I know this will be published, so you can't just completely, and I'm just going to say it, you can't completely piss off your board. You got to be somewhat politically correct. Um, in what state did you find the school when you arrived?
As I've described to a lot of people, TCA has a great reputation in the city of Dallas. The school was not on fire. It wasn't burning, healthy financially.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I think at some level, a lot of people, the reason why they wanted me to come on board was to begin to elevate the level of excellence. And I think sometimes when things are going well, a lot of times people rest on their laurels or say, don't touch anything because everything's running just fine. The problem is Kodak at some level was running just fine one day and then overnight was gone. And I've just had a deep passion for especially Christian education to constantly strive to elevate the excellence in what we do in every facet. And we're asking kids to do that. We're asking kids to strive to
Yeah.
expand, stretch, get better every day. Why would the school not pursue the same thing? What's ironic is that Dallas is a competitive independent school market. And so the minute you rest on your laurels or you rest on we're fine, we're good, everybody's bypassing you right and left, whether that's in your curriculum, pedagogy, athletics, fine arts, fundraising, whatever it might be. If you're not constantly on the edge of striving to get better, then you find yourself all of a sudden way behind the eight ball. And so for me, um, I think for me coming in, the school again wasn't broken, wasn't in a bad place, but had just kind of kept doing the same thing over and over again. And my passion, obviously, I love culture. I love dealing with culture. I love shaping culture, but I also love excellence. And that was, as I came in, a big pursuit, a big desire.
Well, you're very very adroit and focused to understand that when things are going well, or what's perceived as well, that's when you have to really really be careful.
Mhm.
Have you ever seen Niagara Falls, Jeff?
No.
All right. Well, let me describe the scene to you. All right. Well, Niagara Falls is just outside the city of Buffalo, and it's right on the U.S. and Canadian frontier. In fact, it divides right through it, and it's on the Niagara River. The river flows north from Lake Erie, a few miles down the falls and out at the other end to Lake Ontario. That's the way. And then there's the line. Well, as you're going from Buffalo up toward the falls, you get on what's known as the Niagara Falls Parkway, and it's a nice little four-lane divided parkway, just kind of following the river. And if you're watching the river, you see this river, and it begins. You can see that it looks calm, quote unquote, steady state, but that the current's beginning to speed up. Okay, you can see that. And if you look out in the distance, and you can see what will become the top of the falls, but you don't know that yet, maybe three-quarters of a mile out, you see this fog out there rising. Well, that's actually water vapor coming off the falls, is what it is. But you can't see that.
Yeah.
But as you get closer and closer and closer, this water starts to speed up. You can see it over there. And at some point, there's a point which, right, this thing called Goat Island, and there are these signs that are fairly large, and they say no craft beyond this point, motorcraft or anything. Okay, because as it turns out, that um, uh, that current is so strong that beyond that point, even the most powerful motor launches cannot counteract it. You are going. You're not going to stop. And then when you get to the falls itself, and you can go walk on the, you can walk down right at it, and you feel the power of this water just coming right off that the bed of that river. 750,000 gallons a second goes over that fall. And if you're right up at it, you can feel the power of that water. I mean, you're right there and you just feel the whole thing, like, whoa, So, and despite that clear warning, all right, there are at least a half a dozen people that go over those falls every year, some on purpose, by the way.
Mm.
And the ones on purpose, depending on whether the Americans or the Canadians pull you out, assuming you survive, you either get a slap on the wrist or a real heavy fine. Now, can you guess which one's which? You want to make a guess?
Joe, no idea. My goodness.
Well, it's the Canadians they really
Yeah,
slap it to you.
okay.
All right, and so Americans is like, oh, this another stupid American king over there. Okay,
Mm.
so, but that has always remained with me, that you can't see anything about what's coming. I mean, you kind of know it's out there, but I remember the first time I saw that mist, that heavy mist, and it's very heavy because it's the after mist of the falls, the water going up in the air is what
Yeah.
it is. And so when things are going, quote, well, that can be a real danger signal. All right.
Yes, agreed.
And I think your nature is, well, let's see where we really are here and how we can fulfill our mandate and get better. How can we do that? Um, so then, but it was good that you didn't come into a situation where, as they say, the curtains are on fire.
Right.
I've seen situations like that. Now,
Yes. Yeah,
did you know that it was in pretty good shape when you went in?
I did. I did. I'd come from a school prior here that had been in a real bind, and so in so many ways, financially and just trying to figure out who their identity was. So I
Mm-hmm.
had walked through that journey for 5 years prior to coming here, but I am a graduate of Trinity Christian Academy, so I
All
have
right,
studied
you're an
the
alumnus.
school. Yes, so I've studied the school for years, followed it. I was clearly, not to overstate it, but was transformed by the school during my years here by faculty and staff. And so I have ever forever felt indebted to TCA. And so through all those years, staying in contact, watching it, studying what they were doing, I knew that they were in good shape. I knew that they were strong. I think the only thing that had kind of frustrated me in as an alumnus of it and looking back on it was um, this sense of preparing for the future, not just kind of living in the current day. And my philosophy has always been, I'm not trying to help shape and lead a school for my tenure. I'm trying to lead a school for 15, 20, 25, 30 years down the road. I think as leaders, that's what we're called to do. How are you helping your company, your organization, not for just the near future, but for long-term future, sustainability, so that you're constantly growing, so that my grandkids, great grandkids will receive the benefit of the work that I've done. I think when leaders are narrow-minded and just trying to build an organization great for their personal accolades or tenure, it's not what's best for the organization. And for me, I'm trying to build TCA, help TCA to become great for 2050 and beyond. That's been really my goal.
So can and I know you know the answer to this question, but
Mhm.
just succinctly, if I were just asking the question quite innocently, which I'm not, but if I were, um, what would you say is the distinction between being a leader and being an administrator?
Leader, I think the biggest component is vision, long-term vision, and really being able to cast the vision of what the place you believe and you begin to think could really become. I think often administrators get caught up in just the day-to-day task and fires. How do I put out this fire? How do I take care of this task? I've got an upset parent. How do I deal with them? It becomes very short term solving problems. You need those folks. I mean, there's problems to be solved,
Hmm.
which is key. But I think you've really got to have a leader thinking long-term vision and strategy and casting a sense of what the organization could become.
Hmm.
That I believe is really pivotal.
Well, part of that has to be a willingness and the ability to rock the boat a little bit.
You do.
Um,
And I've done that in my 3 years.
Good, good. I'm glad to hear that. I'll tell you a little story. This has been 35 years ago at least. I lived in Pittsburgh for 15 years, and in those days, I was still formally Anglo-Catholic. Um, I'm not anymore, primarily because the Anglican Church has sort of jumped off the left side of the planet, but I still miss it very much. I love the liturgy. Um, I've thought about becoming. Well, I have friends who are Catholic, and they're making their siren songs to me. Come on, Larry. Come on over here.
Come,
And
come.
and I say to them, I would, except for what I would call, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, some of the Roman claptrap, some of the things that I think are added into it. Um, I think if I were going to make a change at this stage in life, it would probably be to the Orthodox Church, which is very Trinitarian, very straightforward. This the liturgy of Saint John Chrysostom. But the drawback there is all the churches are ethnic. I'm
Hmm.
not Russian. I'm not Ukrainian. I'm not Greek. I'm not Egyptian. So that kind of leaves me out, Jeff. You know, and so, but what I was going to tell you was when I was in Pittsburgh, I was a member of a very fine parish, St. Stephen's in Sewickley, an Anglican church. And by the way, just a little bit of note: they were the sponsoring congregation for Billy Graham's last crusade in Pittsburgh
Wow.
in the '80s. Um, but when they were looking for in the '80s, when they were looking for a new rector, now you have to kind of get a feel for this place. This is a mid-sized congregation, maybe morning prayer, Eucharist would have like 700 people in it, and let's just say that it was very well fixed. I'll leave it at that. Okay. And so when they decided they needed a new rector, they hired a national search firm to go looking for this guy. Okay. No, we're not going to, no, 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 this is what we're going to do. So, and they settled on this one man who turned out to be incredible, a man by the name of John Guest, who is still living, and he's still in Pittsburgh. And he was just a little information about him. He was an Englishman, converted in Billy Graham's first London crusade, um, and very well educated, Oxford grad. And,
Hmm.
and of course, that appealed to sort of an upper middle class Anglican congregation, going to have enough, little polish here.
Hmm.
So, um, and so he was given the routine and all this. Of course, in the Anglican Church, I don't know how much of your audience knows this, is that yes, you can make recommendations, but the bishop makes the final decision whether you're going to get your pick or not. Well, in this case, that really wasn't an issue. But toward the end of the process, the vestry, which is the governing body of an Anglican church, they had John in and they asked him so, and they really wanted it, and they said, "So, John, what do you think?" Now, imagine this:
Hmm.
you're looking to get the job. These are the people that make that decision, and here's your answer. Well, quite frankly, I think this parish is on the fast track to fossilization.
Wow.
Now, do you think that got their attention? Well, actually, that's what they were looking for.
Mhm.
They were looking for someone that was going to shake things up
Yeah.
and make it a little uncomfortable because they had enough vision, as you said, to know that the outcome of this was going to be a much better situation. And as a result of his 10 or 15 years there, it became both a liturgical and an evangelical powerhouse. Um,
Wow.
it said to me, I can have smells and bells and still have the Holy Spirit at the same time. Okay. It's not an either or thing here, you know.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
for me, being a Yale Divinity School graduate, having the historical liturgy, having that connection to the first century, understanding all that had gone before, and that I'm a part of that. See, that's important to me, and that, and so you feel it coming already. One thing I do not like is this idea of contemporary Christian music, and so we've just sort of let it stay there. I belong to a Nazarene church here in the Boise Valley, and it's Arminian in theology, similar to the Anglican Church, and we do have an 8 o'clock Eucharist. Now it's very low church, Jeff. No smells, no bells, but it's there. Okay, and then 10:30 is the contemporary service. So I like to jag my fellow parishioners when I say, "Oh yeah, you can have worship at 8 or entertainment at 10. What did you rather have?" um,
Yep.
and that's not all wrong, really. I mean, that's so, but I just, I think there's something to be said for the holiness of God, the reverence
Mm,
of God, um, realizing that He is holy, He is other, and the fact that He would allow us in His presence is almost like wow.
yeah.
And I think there isn't, and this is society at large, there isn't enough respect for the holy, for the other. Um, and sometimes our evangelical brethren and the rush to be relevant becomes
Mm,
so contemporary that it kind of loses some of the impact. So
mhm.
you've heard my sermon this morning. Okay, that's enough of
It's
that.
good.
Um, but so tell me, the school is independent or sectarian?
Christian school, but we're not associated with any church.
Okay.
And so I've overseen a church school, and I just find that TCA has been a great fit. So it's not associated with, we've probably got about 129, 130 different churches represented in our school. So
Congregations or
diverse
traditions?
congregations.
Mm-hmm. Right. Um, so give me a little feel for the breadth of denominations. We got you have what? Presbyterian, Methodist,
Yes.
in
Unit.
any Catholics?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Are you familiar with? I don't know if you know this. You may Robert Barron, Bishop Barron, um, Word on Fire.
Okay.
Yeah, he leads the sort of the evangelical, biblical based drive in the Catholic Church. I interviewed him a couple of months ago, and
Oh, neat.
delightful
Neat.
man. By
Yes.
the way, just as an FYI, he has known Jonathan Rumi, the actor that plays Jesus in The Chosen, for about 20 years, and
How
so he
neat.
he told me a lot about Jonathan's life experience and how that this particular role just kind of dropped in his lap, and it was at a very low point in his life. So,
Um,
which also, we talked about it earlier. God does things when we don't think He's going to do things.
yeah.
You know, and He expects us to be good stewards, but He's ultimately in charge. Don't ever
Yes.
make that mistake. You know,
Yeah.
so how have you kept your humility, Jeff? Listen, I've talked to some of you guys that run these Christian schools, and I'm just going to tell you, sometimes I walk away from the meeting going, "Okay, all right, next."
Yeah. Well,
How do you do
you're
that?
you're nice to even say that. I think first of all, for me, I think the biggest part is coming into this work realizing it's not about me. It really isn't. And I think that's where a lot of folks in multiple leadership roles, especially in the church or anything spiritually, I think people get tripped up with that really, really fast. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I believe a lot of it is you hire great people, you empower them to do their job, you encourage, hold them accountable, and then you just get out of their way
Mm-hmm.
and let them do their work. And that's hard because I think a lot of people aren't willing to let go and hold it lightly. But I think that's what Christ did. I mean, he lived a life of holding things lightly.
Yes, he
And
did.
it was great counsel for me. I had an executive coach my first few years as a head of school, and he told me right off the bat, Jeff, the most powerful thing you can do in this work is be visible, be present, be with people. I'm sitting here thinking about, I got to raise money, I got to do budgets, I've got to deal with parents. I was caught up in the doing component versus the being component.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Busyness.
think, Yes. My background is psychotherapy, so I knew about this kind of concept of being present and relationships and the power of that, which ties so much into fundraising. That's another note. But I think as the leader of an independent school, Christian school, or any organization, if the leader is not visible, if the leader is not present, then it leads people either to function out of fear or just do their own thing. And
Hmm.
then you've got a culture of going all these different directions. To me, my responsibility is to fulfill the mission, obviously, first and foremost, and then lead a life that most, as best that it can, reflect Christ. And that's what God's called me to do. And so
Well,
that's where,
that in itself is a lifelong
oh,
quest, Jeff.
lifelong quest, lifelong quest every day.
Hmm.
Well, we laugh because when I first became a head, I was at a church school, and the pastor of the church was asking me, "So, what do you need? What do you need, Jeff? What do you need to get going here?" And I said, honestly, um, would you build me a kneeling bench? And he goes, "Oh, okay, but what, do you need money? Do you need more classrooms? What do you need? More buses for the football team?" I said, honestly, the only way I feel that I can lead a Christian school well is if I'm on my knees. And so I have it here in my office in the corner, and every morning I'm on my kneeling bench, just holding my hands lightly, saying, "How do you want me to lead this school today? I have no idea what's in front of me. I have no idea what's going to happen. And so help me to make the best decisions. When I'm wrong, help me to take ownership of it and seek forgiveness and then try to make the next right decision." But I just find to lead well, you've got to have a spirit and a posture of humility. And you've just got to be willing to say, "Lord, guide me today. Guide me so
Hmm.
I can lead well."
Um, you're the second person I've interviewed recently who is in what we would say in the Anglican world, it comes out of a quote low church background, but uses a kneeling bench. And in the other case, the individual also uses the Book of Common Prayer,
Yeah,
which is, I think, one of the great classics of Western civilization.
agreed.
Um, and of course, it's, here's there it is right there.
I love it. Love
Okay.
it.
So anyway, that um, so what, and you can use, let's look at your whole career here.
Hmm.
Uh, when you were 10, what did you want to be?
Professional football player.
Okay, all right. When you were 20, what did you want to be?
Professional football player.
Okay. Now, when you're 20, I would think that the die's pretty well cast, Jeff. Is
It
that?
was cast much better. It was cast much better. I tell you what I wanted to do is I love to lead. I wanted the ball in a pressure moment. I
Mm-hmm.
love I do like being in charge. I do like calling the shots. I realize it comes with a lot of responsibility
Yes, it
and
does.
challenges, but innately there was just something inside of me that I want to be the go-to guy. I want to be the go-to guy. And I think those characteristics is what helped me move into a world of leadership because I think I had a lot of um, really gifted mentors in my life that
That makes a
spoke,
big difference if you
oh,
have mentors.
huge, huge
Um,
difference. I tell people all the time, find someone older than you, wiser than you, that has experienced a little more life that can help walk
mm-hmm.
along this journey with you. That is a huge piece of counsel I give folks all the time. It was most valuable for me. I think what was so key is they spoke life into me that said, "You, Jeff, you've got some gifts in this area. You need to explore them. You need to explore them."
Mm-hmm.
And that's what inspired me to keep going and pursue the route that I did.
All right, so you're 20 and you still want to be a football player. When did the realization set in that perhaps that's not going to come to pass?
Yeah.
What should I do?
That was pretty clear that that avenue was not going to be the route. And so I think for me, the biggest piece was I'd worked at a Christian sports camp, and people had constantly
Okay.
said, "You can lead."
As a
And
counselor, you were a
yeah, as a
counselor.
counselor.
Okay.
And
Okay.
they had shared that, man, you're good with kids. You're really good with kids. And so I begin to kind of flesh out where can I use leadership skills and work with kids. Naturally, youth ministry in a church was definitely something to consider. I did that for a while.
Hmm.
Um, I also found that I really was drawn to kids that were hurting, kids that were really struggling, which
Hmm.
ironically ended up going to Denver Seminary, getting a master's in marriage and family and adolescent counseling. And so you just keep taking one step in front of the other, holding it lightly, asking, Lord, what do you want me to do next?
Let's explore that for a minute. I really want to talk about that.
Mm,
Um, you know, I'm another guy that never could figure it out for a long time. Okay. Um, I went into engineering school, uh, 2 degrees in engineering, so electrical engineering. Halfway through, I was in a PhD program actually, and I had a couple of spiritual experiences that just said to me, "This is not where you need to be." Okay,
mhm,
and that what I needed to do, what I felt I needed to do, was to go to seminary, Trinity school. All right.
mm,
Well, I had a faculty advisor who was very understanding and compassionate, and he said, "Well, you've done all the coursework. Why don't you just write a small thesis and we'll give you the master's degree and you're done, as opposed to going up the PhD." So he gave me a topic that I could model a religious system using a mathematical approach, which I actually ended up and used it because the same denomination hired me to do market research for them. But you just never know how
mm.
things are going to happen, right? So,
Yeah.
so then I got into Yale Divinity School, and still it's like, what am I supposed to be doing here now? I don't know the curriculum at Denver Seminary, correct?
Mhm,
I don't know that, but a reason I chose Yale was, well, they kind of chose me, but anyway, they had the most open curriculum for someone who was not committed to the parish ministry. Okay.
mm,
So I didn't come under the sponsorship of a particular denomination. Um, and most of the schools, the curriculum is pretty tight. And so, but they allowed me to be pretty, loosey goosey about it.
mm,
A little story about that. At the time, I applied to what were considered to be the five most selective theological schools in the country, and
mm.
then Yale was the most selective. It was the only one to which I was admitted.
Wow.
I think that's a little, Larry, this is where you should be. Okay.
Clearly.
And this is where I need to be. And I discovered it was a wonderful experience for me. You're probably familiar with the name Henry Nouwen.
Mm,
And Henry was at Yale when I was there.
mhm,
And he taught me a couple of courses. The, I'm sure Denver's the same way, is that this classes are very small. And
mm.
so, and then the faculty, even though they're world class, are very accessible to you,
Yes.
which is another one, a real advantage. And Henry spent more than one evening in my dorm suite, and just a delightful man. One of
Yeah.
the few individuals, male or female, that I have met who, in their presence, they're on a different spiritual plane than you. You just know it, you sense it, you know,
Yeah.
and that was a wonderful experience. But even then, I'm like, well, what am I doing here? It was an emphasis in biblical studies and in ethics. I had a wonderful opportunity to do a tutorial on science and religion with a Nobel laureate who was a philosopher of science. Interesting guy. I mean, he said up front, "Well, I'm an atheist, sorry, but we're going to do this anyway." And so we had a nice ongoing kind of conversation. You know, he wasn't trying to dissuade me, and I wasn't
Mhm.
trying to convert him. We were just going to be open and honest with one another here and just let it go. But anyway, when I finished, you know, I I'd have been in school for like 7 or 8 years, to see,
Mm.
nonstop, and here I am. Here's a good example. You just keep doing what you've been doing because it sounds like the right thing to do. Okay.
Mm.
And a lot of that is fear of the unknown. That's what a lot of it is. I'm sure you see it in your school too.
Mhm.
Fear, where are we going to go if we go this way? So
Right.
I was a finalist for a Danforth scholarship, but didn't get it. And that's when my father, wise man that he was, said to me, Larry, I think it is time for the JOB degree. You know what he's referring to?
Sure.
It's time to get a job. All right.
Yeah.
And enough already, Larry. Okay. So fortunately, I'm old enough and I fell into it at the right time that I left with very little debt. I can't
Mm,
imagine the kids that go through it today.
yeah.
It's just,
Yeah.
two top 10 schools, 3 degrees, and under $5,000 in debt. That just doesn't
Wow.
happen anymore.
No.
You know. So anyway, I went. I wanted to get a job, so I got a job, and I was working for Westinghouse in large scale project management. I used my analytical skills, which have come to help me later in life, by the way. Okay, it's
Mhm.
amazing how if you're kind of trying to seek God's will, how He kind of arranges things, and he's very much a triangle. He's a triangulator the way it works. I've seen that in my own life. So then I got into fundraising, kind of like sideways this way, and I was kind of mid career. So you're telling me that's sort of what happened to you.
Hmm.
Am I right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly right.
So, so you get into, did you go right into a top administrative slot? Is that where you started?
I worked first as kind of a consultant for a school, and then went immediately into middle school head, upper school head, and head of school. It was
See,
just kind of a quick progression.
we share a common history, Jeff, because when I started in fundraising, I worked for Ketchum, which was at that time the number one legacy fundraising consulting firm. It was the McKinsey of the business. All right.
Okay.
And I'm coming at it totally without experience in that anyway. I mean, I had life experience. I was 32 years old, but I didn't have that other. So then what they did for me, and what a wonderful God gift was that for 18 months, I was put with various senior executives to work on their jobs and was not expected to generate fee on my own, although I was paid a salary. Now, that's an opportunity. You know?
That is.
So I saw from the very best how it's done. So that's why when I did get into higher ed, you'll love this. Within 3 years after leaving Ketchum, I had my first vice presidency, okay, at university. And that's because of what I brought to the table, you know.
Yeah.
Now, I won't deny that there were some rumbles when I come into a shop where people have been laboring in the annual fund for 10 years. And in 3 years, this guy is like, oh, what is this guy? What's so
Who's
special
this
about
guy?
him?
Yeah.
What is this? Um, and you know enough about fundraising to know that the large gifts and the capital fundraising projects is the coin of the realm, and
Mm.
they're the jet fighters, the Top Guns, the fly boys, And when they come
Mm.
in, oh, here he is. Here's what he can do. So anyway, enough of that. But so you went from just that right into your first right into. So tell me about
Yeah.
that experience. I want to hear how it went for you.
Um, I tell you, a lot of it was not necessarily an area that I'd been trained in, academically. I didn't get an
Mm-hmm.
education degree. But from my experiences of being a student here at TCA and
Yeah.
and knowing and seeing what I had seen, and I think it was one of those things where honestly, I just felt a sense of presence. I couldn't really clearly define it, but just that, Jeff, this is what I've called you to do. I will prepare you. I will equip you. You just be willing to go do hard things and walk forward in faith and believe that I'm going to use you. I would say my counseling background helped tremendously because
Mm-hmm.
obviously working with people, the independent school, you've got folks that education is a top priority for them. They've got their entire life mapped out for their kid of where their kid should go and what they should do and how it
Oh
should
yes,
happen.
we know
And
that
so,
group.
you've got to be willing to talk with people and work with them and help them work through and see that their plan may not be God's plan for their child, and that's okay. So I found myself doing a tremendous amount of just counseling with people and walking them through life with their kids. And those of us that have kids know parenting is one of the hardest things in the world to do. One of the
Mm-hmm.
hardest things to do because no two kids are the same, and
Even
you
out of the
feel
same family and same life
even out of the
situation.
same family. Exactly right. And I think parents hold a great sense of my identity is in my child. And
Oh
that's not
yes.
nowhere in the Bible does it say that your identity is in your
Oh
child.
yes.
Um,
Oh, to wit, all the sideline parents at athletic events.
exactly. Yes. I mean, that's it. And so I just found that I found myself in these situations where like I'm really doing therapy all day long, ironically. Um, and so I
So
just found it interesting.
well, so you had, you had pretty well, you had a lot of what I would call accomplished parents who were living through their children to some
Yes.
extent, maybe to fill out some things that they didn't have. We're getting into Jung here, a little Freudianism.
Yes.
How do we live through our offspring? So, so it was that background that that counseling background gave you both the understanding and the empathic approach
Yeah.
that would enable you to do this.
Oh yeah.
Um, um, oh,
Clearly.
this is fascinating. I'm enjoying this,
It was
Jeff. Um,
well, it really I look back and just think ultimately it was the goodness of God, honestly, who
mhm.
I think had a plan for me that I just, didn't know. And I think what gets a lot of times people in a bind or limits their potential is they have a tendency to limit God and say, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. I mean, I'm surrounded by a lot of families that say, my child will go to the university that I went to. They will get the same degree. They'll be in the same fraternity. They'll have the same experiences. They'll be married the day they get out. They'll get this high level job in Dallas and live down the street from us in a $2 million home. And all this is going to happen by the age of 25. And they may not say this, but
But that's
sometimes it just
that's
plays
what they're
itself
thinking.
out. That's what they're thinking. And
Well,
you limit
you,
God.
well, you may be familiar with this, and you may not. But there's a quote from Agatha Christie, the mystery novelist, that I really enjoy, and it is, "Life is what happens while you make your plans."
Well said.
Yeah,
Well said.
and
Yeah.
oh, and the other one, forget where this comes from, but man proposes, God disposes. You
Mm.
know, and um, well, when you think of it, that's really a perspective of anti-faith. Is what
Yeah.
it is,
Yeah.
and we are called to live lives of faith, to hold life a little loosely, you
Mm.
know, not grip it so tightly that we end up strangling maybe ourselves or our potential or our children's potential. That you allow, And are you familiar at all with the series The Chosen?
Oh, yes.
Well, it took me a while to summon up enough unks to go look at it because I'll tell you, I'm just going to be very frank. I have a very, very sensitive bullshit meter. All right. I
Mm-hmm.
just, and I'd say 90% of what, what is presented to me as faith-based entertainment or faith-based, whatever, is propaganda.
Mm.
It's poorly made or a combination. And I just like, no, no,
Yeah.
people, we can do better than this. So when I finally was persuaded, Larry, take a look at this. I was very, very, very pleasantly surprised. And as
Mm.
I continued to watch it, one thing that occurred to me was, and I'm a student of the scriptures here. I've read it, you know,
Mm.
Jesus really did take people at whatever stage in life he found them, whatever it was.
Mm. Yeah.
There were no presuppositions with him, you know. And we know that. I mean, we hear it all the time. Jesus says, "Come, all who are burdened and heavy laden," but those words kind of lose their meaning.
Yeah, they do.
And after so many times of being familiar with it, and then when you see it, that he would no, it's just what it is. It is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And he just accepted people, which, by the way, was one of the things that really infuriated the religious leaders of the day, because they wanted to put a lot of preconditions
Yeah.
on people before they would even talk to them. So you've been able to do that pretty well, Jeff. So Um, I normally ask people, and maybe I'll skip this question, but I think I'm going to ask it anyway. So, changing the names to protect the guilty, um, is there a story that you would like to relay that would illustrate some of these things? It doesn't have to be from where you are now, but it could be anywhere in your life or careers that would kind of add some flesh to this.
Wow, that would be something I would deeply want to process and think through of what would be, you know, at some level, I feel like one of the things I love doing the most with students is hearing their story.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think a lot of times young people, their story is written for them instead of allowing them to live out their story.
You want to say that
Uh,
again? Let's say that
yeah.
again. Just so the audience gets this.
Well, I think a lot of times kids don't live out their story. It's pre-scripted for them either by someone else, media, the world we live in, especially nowadays with social media and the power of that. They want to write stories for kids. And ironically, what comes to my mind, honestly, is last week I just did a 5-day backpacking trip with 7 of our student leaders. And one of my favorite things to do with them is have them get by themselves when we're up in this valley near this pass. And I just ask them to write out their story. And who do you think you are? And who do you think God's called you to be? It's really fascinating because most kids can't even go there. They're used to being so wired into messages and to be this what goes back to Psalm 46 to be still and know that he is God is a lost art.
Mm-hmm. They're being
Most
totally reactionary.
reactionary. They're not experiencing really, and each assignment on each day of the trip is I encourage them to really listen and see if they hear something from God. I don't tell them it'll be necessarily of a voice but just in your spirit. And I think we live in a world that's just so disconnected from that today. And
Mm-hmm.
I think we've got to get back to it. I think we need to begin to help ourselves, but especially help this younger generation realize what does it mean to really be still and listen. Chuck Swindoll wrote a great book called Intimacy with the Almighty, and he talks about 4 S's that I try to remind folks of often: silence, solitude, simplicity, and surrender. We often don't really wrestle with those things, and those are key avenues to creating intimacy with our Almighty Savior. Moments of silence, moments of being by yourself in solitude, moments of simplicity, and moments of surrender. At some level, it's almost like you and your cigar and scotch out back, a moment
Mm-hmm.
of silence, a
Yeah,
moment of solitude.
it's the monastic life.
Beautiful. Yeah, I think
Yeah,
too many people get away from that,
yeah.
unfortunately.
Um,
That's helped me tremendously in my journey.
I may have mentioned to you, I can't remember. There's a loose, it's a loose organization founded by a gentleman in Nashville called the Holy Smokes,
Yes.
and
Not,
it's a group of men in local groups. We have one here, and we meet once a month for cigars and whiskey one afternoon, and it's a wonderful experience. It really it fits all of what you just said. It's a
mm,
time away. And for those in the audience who don't understand this, it takes about 90 minutes to smoke a good cigar. All right. This isn't an over and done thing. This is not like a cigarette. Ooh, I hate those things. And and then of course that with the whiskey, and then it's done in the company of other people, so it's a fellowship kind of thing, and it's a coming together, and so there's an opportunity. And in this case, we're all Christian, we're all believers, and of one stripe or another, and it's really very kind of, it's like, okay, this is, we're just going to talking about life, and we all share the similar sort of assumptions about life, and it's a very relevant experience. So you're talking about the very same thing. It's what you're
wow.
talking about, and there's not enough of that in the world, really.
There's not.
No.
There's not.
So
And
um
I feel a great responsibility because kids spend really more waking hours with us than they do even with their parents at this point. Once you start getting into school, I mean, in the evening, they've got soccer practice and they need to shower and homework and things like that. But really, the majority of their waking hours is with us. And so I feel a huge responsibility with my faculty and staff of are we modeling? Are we calling into existence? Are we encouraging a life that is in union with God or building unity
Hmm.
with God, in communion with God? It's powerful.
Well, you're taking the term that I was well acquainted with going through school, in loco parentis, quite seriously. All right.
Very,
Um,
very.
and I read somewhere once regarding parenthood that a parent has about 11 summers with their child. And
Mm,
after that, the world takes over.
yeah.
And you're filling in some of that need. Now, are you high school and grammar, or just what are you?
Pre-K through 12.
Okay,
So,
so the
yeah,
everything. Okay.
everything.
Um,
Yep.
and what's the enrollment of the school total?
We're a little over 1,500
Okay.
students.
And are you day boarding or mixed?
Just day.
Hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, boarding school is a whole different can of
Oh,
worms.
whole nother. Yes. So true.
so, so everyone comes from the Dallas Fort Worth area where you are. Okay.
Yes.
Now, do you run a busing program, or everyone just gets there on their own?
Gets there on their own.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. And how old is the school?
We are entering our 56th year.
Congratulations.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Thank you.
Um, Now, I want to talk a little bit about philanthropy and development. That's my shtick. Okay.
Yes. Yes,
And
yes, yes.
so I want to talk a little bit about that. What do you, I want to talk about your program in a minute. But before that, what role do you think philanthropy has in a school like yours? Big, big picture.
Pretty monumental, honestly. We're tuition driven, but obviously we've got buildings, assets, things that have got to be taken care of that not necessarily the operational budget will oversee. So we don't get any state, federal dollars. Obviously raising money is monumental for us to, as I describe it, move from being just a good school to a great school.
Hmm.
It allows us to have resources to do things above and beyond. You're trying to keep tuition at as a reasonable amount as possible. I mean,
Hmm.
obviously, we're trying not to tap ourselves out of the market, but there still are additional costs that go on above and beyond that, and then there's
Hmm.
vision that for do different things. So I also feel like strongly that the book of Luke, to whom much is given, much is expected in return.
Hmm.
And there is great joy in giving to something, especially, I believe, giving to something that's training the next generation of great Christian men and women, whatever
Hmm.
field they may choose to go into. So philanthropy, in my mind, obviously is needed, but number two, probably the most important is I think it creates avenue for people to experience great joy in giving to something that has tremendous value, eternal value at that,
Hmm.
eternal value.
Well, and I didn't give you that answer in advance. I just want to make that very clear to everyone. Um, let me add to that a little bit. I've been in the business, the fundraising business. Oh, we're getting close to 40 years now, and
Mm,
I've raised a great deal of money in during my career. Um, but I developed a certain perspective over the years that I've done it. About I guess, a couple of weeks ago, I was speaking with someone, and this man said to me, Larry, you look at this different than anybody else I've ever talked to. And I said, well, how's that? And he says, there again, he says, well, so when did you have your aha moment? Now, what he didn't know at the time is, um, what we do at the Eight Principles is we have a live curriculum that we train people to use inside of an organization to adjust their culture. That's what we do. Okay. I mean, part of that is skill building and the kind of things you usually expect, but it's really more about having the right perspective, the right point of view. And everyone in the organization needs to share that if you're going to get to where you really could get. So he says, so when did you have your aha moment that it's not about the money? It's not about the mission. It's really about those who are investing in you and how you can give them their joy. So you mentioned that. So you triggered that. And I said, well, there wasn't, for me, it wasn't a moment. It was the result of working with a lot of people over the years, and what they really enjoyed most. It's not about the money, and money's involved. It's the fuel,
Sure.
but
Yeah.
it's not about that. And it's not even, as I like to tell people, and some of my faith brethren get annoyed with me when I say this stuff, but I'm just going to say it anyway. And that is, I'm sorry, but it's not about you. It's not about your mission. It's not about anything you're doing. It's about giving the donors the joy, you see. And many organizations never understand that. They're so money driven. And part of it's because I got to have money today, tomorrow, and the next week. It becomes that kind of grind. And when you lose your life, you gain it. When you don't worry about the money and you're worried about other things, you get it. You see, and but you have to hold on to it loosely. Um,
You're right. Yeah.
you see that, so that's the thing that I tell people. It's when someone gives a gift, they're not really giving it to you. They're giving
Mhm.
it through you. You
Yeah.
know, and and I'll tell you, Jeff, I like to say to people sometimes, God save me from nice people. All right. And they're just so, well motivated, and they're so, it's like, please just, I don't need to be sold. Just, it should, and so that's, and are you familiar? You may not know this, but St. Paul really wanted to have a ministry to wealthy people.
Hmm.
Second Timothy, you go take a look, read that closely. People with wealth need to have an outreach. We need to reach out to people with wealth because it is a condition that has its own challenges, you
Hmm.
see. And a lot of my wonderful Christian brethren, they have a great deal of cynicism when it comes to money. And we're all, oh, it's this, that, and the other, blah, blah, blah. And frankly, there's a lot of malicious jealousy out there of people who do have money, you see.
Yeah.
And in my career, I've seen a lot more of what I call reverse snobbery than I have of the classic kind, the top down kind, especially among people who are philanthropic. They don't think that way. That isn't who
Hmm.
they are. And instead, they feel a great responsibility, sometimes a burden on how do I deal with this? How do I do this properly? They don't need another boat. They don't need another plane. They don't need another anything, that sort of thing. Okay. And they don't respond that way either. Um, so I think that many fundraising organizations, many of our they shoot themselves in the foot by making it about them. And then, since we're on a roll, I'm going to say something else too, and that is one thing that really annoys. And I want you to respond to me on that. One thing that really annoys me. Now I know it's not maybe intended this way, but this is
Hmm.
the way it comes across. All right, Jeff, I want you to. I'd like you to make this gift, but before you do that, I want you to go pray and find out how much God wants you to give me. It makes my skin crawl. And there are any number of organizations that do just like that or something like it. And I
Yeah.
say to them, if they're still listening to me by that time, I say, do you know what you're doing? You're taking this donor's agency away.
Hmm.
They're adults. They have
Yeah.
their own relationship with God. You don't need to intervene into that. you know
Mm-mm.
and by telling them, go ask God, then come back and give it to me, you know I mean, oh, I just and so now that I've raised that thing, just start listening and you'll see it a lot. Okay.
Yeah.
And it's like, instead, you know who this person is. You know the process they're going to go through to make a decision. You treat them with agency. Let them
Hmm.
make up their own mind, you see. And another organization, another way they do that is, they don't bother to ask people because they think it's going to be no. They're, again, taking their agency away
Yeah.
from them instead of treating them as children of God with their own independent souls who make their
Hmm.
own independent decisions. You see,
Yeah.
your goal is to reach out to them. Their goal is to respond, yes and no,
Fine.
or maybe, you know, and to accept that. Um,
Hmm.
so, you know, yeah, okay, that's one of my angst. So So tell me about your fundraising program, Jeff. Now that I've thoroughly painted you into a corner.
Oh, well, ironically, we're in a bit of a transition with our fundraising program. I think the history here, and again, I'm only going into year 4, so I'm still kind of exploring myself. Um, I think we've had some great folks that have been very good at raising money. Um, I think a little bit of it has been along the pathway of transactionalism versus transformational, relationship-based giving. I think there's been some very, very strong relationships that have been built with certain people on our campus, families. Um, but you have a tendency to get locked into what you were just describing a minute ago. We need to raise X amount of money in X amount of time. So let's go do that and get on it versus the reality of obviously you want to verbalize needs that you have, but it's about the relationship. The Lord will put on their heart what he wants them to give. They
He'll,
they will determine what they want to give.
if if this goal is within the purview of God's allowance, the and you're doing your part, which is to make it available to people, um, you fulfilled your part.
Hmm.
And then beyond that, your responsibility is to really be a minister to these philanthropists.
Yeah.
You're ministering to them. How can I help you?
Hmm.
And if you're talking to the right people, and you learn that pretty quickly,
Hmm.
you're going to get people who are very sympathetic to what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
And then, of course, it's a matter of helping them define for themselves how they want to fulfill this. Now,
Hmm.
it sounds pretty high minded and vague, and in some cases it is. And I know that with the capital campaign, it's a little bit different. You've got a very defined project in a defined period of time, and you're doing the traditional scaling and this and that, and all the things that go with it. But
Yeah.
ultimately, it's really trying to help people fulfill what God has for them, especially in a
Hmm.
faith-based situation,
Yeah.
where you make the presumption and that these people are operating out of a sense of spiritual impetus. Um,
Hmm.
so you don't need to remind them. You don't need
Hmm.
to tell them go pray. No, they're that's like these people are not 3 years old. Okay, they got it. Okay,
Yeah.
and so that you just put it before them and listen to what they say to you and then lead them. That's all you do.
Yeah.
Um, when I've worked with donors directly, and and I'm working at anything significant in terms of amount or multi-year or anything like that, I'll say to them, so Jeff, what is it you'd like to accomplish?
Mm.
Just like that. And I just listen, and I'm genuinely interested. And
Hmm.
you'd be amazed some of the things that come out of those conversations. And I can guarantee you that whatever is ultimately negotiated in terms of dollars and cents is almost without exception a far greater monetary value than it would have been otherwise. All
Mm.
right. Because it's not about the money, it's about
Yeah.
accomplishing something that they want to see happen. And that could be a little thing, a big thing. Um, and and you have, if you're representing the organization, you have to be careful. You don't want any. Well, what we really want is a pink Tower of Babel in the front yard, and I'll pay for it. Well, Jeff, maybe that just isn't something we can accommodate. I mean, now that's an outrageous
Yeah.
example, but you know what I'm talking about. You see, there's
Yeah.
sometimes that you have to say a very polite no, thank you. All right,
Right.
but and I'm sure you ran into a few of those.
Oh yeah.
So let me put something before you. Um, I'm going to challenge you. Maybe we should do this in a year. Okay,
Mm.
I'm going to challenge you to think about how you're going to create and install a culture of philanthropy in your
Mm.
organization, which is of which one piece of it is fundraising. Fundraising is sort of the mechanical piece that goes with it. Okay. I'm going to challenge you to think about how you're going to do that. Because if you can do that, do you know a man by the name of Russell James?
Mm-mm.
Well, he's practically your neighbor. He's at Texas Tech. Okay.
Okay.
Now he's a guy you should look up. Anyway, he for many years he's been probably, in my view, the best researcher in my business ever. Russell James, I can introduce you if you'd like, and he's the author of a couple of books, and one of them, of course, is the Biblical Foundations of Fundraising. He's done a lot of research. Here's what he's discovered. Like, well, he's put the numbers behind it. I mean, I knew this was the case. I mean, you know, this is one of the things being an old man does for you. There isn't much you haven't seen. All right. And so I knew what he was telling me was true from my own experience, but he quantified it. Most organizations, especially those that are faith based, this is what I think is interesting, whether they be a school or a ministry, a social ministry or a church, whatever it might be, they view giving in very narrow terms. They view
Mm,
giving in terms of revenue, income. Okay, not wealth. Okay, so that there's been some changes in the rules recently, and he was able to get access to the tax records of about 1.5 million nonprofits, which gave him, he's a number cruncher. And
mm,
here's what he discovered: if you're focused on income, giving out of income, which most organizations are, okay, over a 5 year period, your total gain is going to be about 11%. Well, that's about inflation.
yeah.
Right? However, if on the other hand, you have a more expansive view and you're really focused on a relationship with wealth, and I'm using that, I don't mean, Daddy Warbucks. Okay. I mean the concept of wealth as opposed to income, then your gain's going to be 6x, Jeff.
Mm,
6 times. But that requires a very deliberate decision on the part of the organization to pursue those paths. And very few organizations are set up to do that.
mm,
Because as you said earlier, well, we got to raise X here, X here, X here, X here. And I can tell you, and you're gonna nod. Independent schools are notorious of
mm.
over soliciting their parents. You know it. I know it.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Um,
Exactly right.
I I worked with a Catholic school, good Catholic high school, raises a lot of money, and I was telling them, you're soliciting your people too often. Let's if you have things that come up every friggin' year, budget them. Let's get them out of a separate ask, because the number one thing that donors don't like is being asked too often. And I
Hmm.
suspect that 80% of your philanthropic revenue comes from parents or grandparents or some familial connection. All right.
Hmm.
Well, if every 6 weeks they're getting asked for yet another thing on top of the tuition they just shelled out in September, well,
Yeah.
it gets to be a little bit weary, even for the most affluent parent. It's just the whole idea of it. It's not so much. So I said, cut all that out. All right. Now you can't do it immediately. I get that, but do it over a 2 or 3 year project where you only have like a solicitation in the fall, solicitation and it's for the school at large. Well, guess what? They finally took my advice, finally. All right. And now they're raising 2 and 3 times what they were raising before, and people are a lot happier. You see, that's what I'm talking about. So,
So good.
so I want you to, in a year from now, we're going to have this conversation again.
Good.
And I want you to tell me, here are the steps I've taken, Larry, to try to get this in place at my school.
Mhm.
And it's all here. It's in attitudes, and it starts at the top with your board, comes down, and goes out into the community. Is what it does. And if you're not raising at least twice as much what you're raising now, I'll eat my hat. Like, now, tell me about your board. I want to know about your board. Who are they? How many do you have?
Yes, we have 12 currently,
12. Okay.
board members. Um, I mean,
Of the,
honestly,
what percentage of them are current parents?
all of them. All but
Oh,
two. All but two. All but two.
oh, you got
Yes.
problems there, Jeff.
Yes. Yes.
Well,
All but
oh,
two are right now.
not that they aren't good people.
Sure.
But
Sure.
it limits their horizon. They're
Agreed.
interested in their kids, as they should be.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. So I've got only two of them are non-students in the school. I'm I'm helping right now kind of lead, educate, train the board. I'm bringing in different people to kind of help meet with them and talk about best practices and how we should be functioning. They've not done a lot of that in the
Mhm.
past. They've had some, but right now is kind of a pivotal time for I think one of my responsibilities is to help lead the board in a
Oh
way
yeah.
so that we're functioning at a high level. And we're not there yet, but I think um, we've got folks that are eager to move in the right direction with that. So that's encouraging. Again, back to the word attitude. I mean, that is a monumental piece. If they were resistant to that, I'd have a whole nother issue on my hands. But they've been incredibly supportive of me. They're very excited. There's been a lot of change. So I think they're trying to help guide me the best of their ability to release me for change, but also realize what can the organization handle
Hmm.
and make sure I don't go too fast.
Hmm.
So I appreciate that. We've integrated a lot of self-evaluations. I meet with the board chair every other week, which is
Oh
helpful to get
wow.
constant
Okay.
feedback. And
How often are your formal board meetings?
they were every single month. We've pulled back from that. I think there were too many, which was naturally drawing us. Again, after COVID, most boards were far more into the weeds because there was this just gap, chasm that boards felt like they needed to fill with navigating the
Hmm.
COVID scenario. Now that that has passed us, I'm trying to help move them away from every month. We're down to only seven per year board meetings. I think we would love to even move that even possibly just
Hmm.
quarterly.
You you
Um,
you want them out of operations, and I know that can be tough, especially if you got a bunch of parents on your board. They're
sure,
well-meaning, but
you
it
bet,
takes their eye off the ball.
you bet.
Um, okay, all right. So,
I'm pleased. You hear nightmare stories all over the
mhm.
place.
Oh yeah.
I do feel that we both are on the same page, and my board chair has been a huge encouragement and support of me, of my wife and our family, and so that's been a tremendous help in me being able to do what we've done so far.
Okay. Well, I meant what I said. We're going to have this conversation again, if you're willing,
Oh
and
yes.
and we can see what you've gone. To kind of close things out, is there anything that we haven't discussed that you'd really like to share, or you'd like to bring up?
I think if anything, fundraising philanthropy is a monumental component and responsibility of the head of school.
Hmm.
With that being said, talk to as many people, i.e., this was such a blessing for me to connect with you several months ago. I got your book. I had my team read the book. Um, Always seek wise counsel on what great philanthropy looks like.
Hmm.
That would be the last piece, and I'm not doing that as a promotion for necessarily your book or what you've done, but I just think it's important for heads to realize you've always got something to learn. And
Oh
you
yeah.
always need to be reminded of what really is the purpose of philanthropy in your school. Your book was incredibly helpful. I also think our conversation was very inspiring and encouraging and challenging for me to think about the minute you feel like you've got this thing all figured out, be careful. Be
Oh,
careful.
that's the
Um,
way it is in life in general. When you
yes.
start believing your own press releases, you're in
Yeah.
trouble.
Well, so
Uh,
constantly be a learner of the art of philanthropy.
all right. Well, thank you, Jeff. Everyone,
Yeah.
we've been having a delightful conversation with Jeff Williams, who's head of school at Trinity Christian Academy in Dallas or Fort Worth? Fort Dallas, right?
Dallas. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh, please, I don't want to get that wrong. So, and it's been delightful. So, I want to thank Jeff for taking some time with us, and I want to thank our listeners. So, thank you again, and we'll be having another one of these very soon.